Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 6th and tonight's movie is Hell House LLC. Hell House LLC is a found footage movie. It had its first screening at a 2015 horror festival, but didn't get released to the mass public on stuff like Google Play or Vudu or stuff like that until 2016. It's one of the more obscure films on this list. It didn't get a theatrical release, and not a lot of people know about it, and that sucks because this is one of the best found footage movies I've ever seen. I'm giving this movie a 9 out of 10, and as of this point is my second favorite movie of 31 Horror Nights after The Conjuring 2. The plot is that there was something terrible that happened in a haunted house in New York. Like, not an actual haunted house, like a haunted house attraction. It happened in 2009, and a bunch of people died, and the details of the case were kept from the public. So a few years later, some people decided to make a documentary about it. So they tried to track down the people who were involved, and one of the people, a girl named Sarah, who was one of the crew in the haunted house, brought back tapes because they documented the entire thing. So it's basically a pseudo-documentary about the whole thing with the found footage. First of all, they picked an amazing location. This house, you think old creepy house, this is exactly what it is. It's not technically a house, it's a hotel, but it's just brilliant for a horror movie. It's creepy, it's old, there's so many blind corners, and they add to it by adding a bunch of mannequins because they're making this into a walk-through haunted house. This element of the movie is used very well. One of the first things we see is a camcorder video of one of the patrons on that opening night. And it starts out normal, like the silly jump scares, the creepy decorations, but things start to feel like they're wrong. Like at one point, a scary clown, one of the scares, starts running against the tide of traffic, and it doesn't pay anybody any mind. This movie kind of plays on when you're going into a walk-in haunted house, there's always the idea of, no matter how scary it is, I can have some peace of mind in knowing that it is all fake. This movie takes that peace of mind and shatters it. But for the most part, that one opening night is just the payoff. The build-up in the days leading up to it is amazing. Basically, you got the people behind this haunted house. They call it Hell House in the movie, and they go and they rent this place. They even stay there once they can get power going in there, and paranormal activity starts happening. And it's just so clever the way it's done. A lot of the scares are based around props moving around. Like, they establish that one of the creepy clowns in the basement, which is supposed to be the final scare of the attraction, can't move its head. But at one point, they see every single one of those clowns, having their heads in a different position than they were a few seconds ago. There are also a lot of good scares where props are being moved off screen and nobody knows who did it. I'm going to save my favorite scare to talk about that for the spoiler section. My second favorite scare, a lot of haunted houses have strobe lights in it. And one of the scenes, they had someone record what it looks like. So they turned out all the lights, they shut the door, and there were strobe lights. And when you were recording it, I thought it was a moving shot because it looks like you go to a different part. There's different dummies arranged in different ways. But then I realized it was a still shot. And every time the lights flicker, you can see there's there were 3 spooks standing in one frame, and then in the next time it flickers, there's only one, or they move positions a little bit, and it's really, really clever, and it's also really subtle. I like that a lot of the scares in this movie are pretty subtle. One of them at the very end, this one isn't really a spoiler. They're just walking around the house, and the cameraman just pans the camera, and it's really quick. He doesn't notice it. He doesn't acknowledge it, but you can see that there's just a dark figure standing there doing nothing, and they don't draw attention to that. It's kind of like the opposite of Sinister from yesterday, where every time there's a scary image, the movie really wants to drive home how scary it is by a loud noise in the score. This one just lets things happen and lets the audience just sit there and take it in. This is one of the best found footage movies I've seen, and I've seen a lot. It's clever, it's scary, it's well paced, the build-up is tremendous, and it has a good payoff. It sticks the landing, which I really liked. This is something I would highly recommend. If you are kind of iffy on the found footage thing, this might change your mind a bit. This was really, really good, really, really clever, and I hope that over the years it becomes a classic, because it deserves it. Now let's go into some spoilers. Okay, my favorite scare in the entire movie is When they walk into the house, like at the very beginning, when they're just setting things up, they go to the dining area and it's a total mess. Like there are tables turned over, there's cobwebs, there's trash on the floor, and it's already creepy enough. So what they do is that they just set up some like zombie dummies or like people like sitting there eating weird stuff. And at one point at night, they are going around and they hear a noise in that room, and they go in and they look around and there's nothing there. And then they turn around and leave, and then once the room is out of sight, you hear a grandfather clock chime, and they turn back and the entire room is completely pristine. There's no trash on the floor. There's one big table that's set up for a bunch of people to eat. There's a grandfather clock that wasn't there before. There are candles lit. There's a picture on the wall, and it all happens in a few seconds. That was brilliant. I almost wanted to laugh when I saw that. That was just so good. Now let's talk about how this movie ended, which I also thought was really clever. It's revealed towards the beginning that like a lot of people like disappeared in this hotel. That's why it closed down. And of course, the main guy running the haunted house didn't tell anybody about that because he thought it wouldn't matter. But with all the paranormal activity starting, like everybody's tense, and then opening night comes along. And the final scare of the entire attraction is they go in the basement and there is a woman, one of the actors, who's like chained to the ceiling, and she like has ripped clothing, and there are a bunch of creepy clowns like sitting on the opposite wall looking at her. And they establish that in order for like no funny business to happen, one of the clowns is an actor there, and he has the key to the cuffs, and he's there to put a stop to it if anything bad happens. But that's the clown that ends up running away. So that girl is locked to the ceiling. She can't move. She's handcuffed on there, and she's screaming. She's begging for help. Like, this isn't part of the act. This is really happening. Somebody help me. And at that point, you see a bunch of dark figures like start walking up, and they like overtake her. They overtake a lot of the patrons, and they run away, and everybody tries to evacuate the house. And then at the very end, you see one of the members of the haunted house hang himself. And that's how the previous owner of the hotel died. He hanged himself. That was really clever. It starts out where you see that the only survivor is this one woman named Sarah. And then she seems like cooperative enough when doing interviews, and like at one point she says, okay, I'll be in my hotel, look in room 2C if you need me. And then she leaves, and there are 3 documentarians. 2 of them go to the house to get some more footage, and they tell the last one to look through the remaining footage that they have left that they haven't seen yet. And that one sees on that footage that the woman that they were just interviewing, Sarah, gets her throat stabbed. In the footage, you see it happening. You see her die. And the other 2 documentarians who don't know about this, they go down, and before they leave the hotel they're staying at, they tell the woman at the front desk, if the woman in 2C wants to know where we are, just tell them that we'll be back soon. And then the lady at the front desk says, our room numbers don't have letters in them. And they can't find anybody with that name at the hotel. And then when we go back to the Hell House, the hotel where the haunted house took place, they see that one of the rooms is named 2C, and it was just like, oh, that was so great. And then they open the door and they see that girl on the bed, and she turns around and she's all bloodied up just like she was that night. She was totally fine. There wasn't a scratch on her throughout the entire movie. But then that happens, and then a bunch of black figures start appearing, and then they attack the 2 documentarians. It was just a really great build up throughout this horror movie and a really good payoff to it. This is one of the best found footage movies I've ever seen. I loved it. It's clever. It's scary. It's just a really, really good movie. I would highly recommend it to anybody listening. I'll see y'all tomorrow.